Hello, this is Janet from janetsandberg.com, and you're listening to the Phoenix Wisdom Podcast, the weekly show that talks to peers and professionals who open up about their darkest moments when they felt like ending it all, why they didn't, and how they transformed their lives in order to triumph over the darkness and despair. Please remember to subscribe if you'd like to hear more inspiring stories. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Phoenix Wisdom Podcast. I'm your host, Janet Sandberg, and today we are joined by the lovely Elana Davidson. Welcome, welcome. Can you just start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thank you all for having me here. So my name is Elana Davidson. I am the author of the book, Finding Your Own Happy, The Soul Searcher's Guide to Peace and Happiness in Everyday Life. And this book is a part chronicle of my experience overcoming decades of struggles with often suicidal level depression and getting to a place of greater happiness. And then also a bit of self-help and helping you access and gain some of the insights and tools that really helped me transform my journey and get to the other side of struggling perpetually with depression.
Amazing. I am very excited to learn more about you and your journey and what made it into the book and maybe some little extras that didn't make it into
Yes,
the book. Um,
sure.
So let's go back. What started this journey of depression and suicidal ideation for you? What was going on in your life when things were bad?
Yes. Okay. So the furthest back I can track that I didn't want to live was probably around 11 years old. Now, I was struggling before that. I remember being in the second or third grade and singing the song, Nobody Likes Me, Everybody Hates Me, and feeling rather sad.
Yeah.
When I was 11, I had a teacher that I'd had for 4 years. He was diagnosed with cancer, and on Christmas Day, he died.
Oh my
And that
God.
was the beginning for me of really questioning, why am I here? What is the point of life? Do I even want to be here? And I really didn't have a lot of support in dealing with that experience. And I didn't realize until I was in my 20s, actually, what a severe impact that had on me. I thought, oh, I'm fine. That wasn't a big deal. Turns out it was a way bigger deal than an 11-year-old could possibly navigate or handle on her own.
Oh,
And that with
definitely.
just absent parents that weren't able to give me the emotional support that I needed or the care that I needed, were pretty sort of absorbed in their own lives. Those were two factors that definitely contributed to what became decades of struggles with depression and suicidal ideation.
Yeah.
So
I,
that's sort of a bit of my origin story.
I can't even imagine first of all, having had the same teacher for 4 years when you're in elementary school
Yeah.
like that. You would be so attached. When my son was in second grade, his teacher passed away, not sometimes still in the fall. So he'd only been his teacher for a few months, and it was devastating.
Mhm.
Like, I can't
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
imagine for a child
I mean,
to
I call
be
him my
so,
third parent.
yeah, you would, after
He was
seeing them
and I
all
was in
day, every day for that long. Yeah.
absolutely. And I was in a unique school. It was a new school that was just starting. And so he really brought the school along and helped build this school. He was, yeah, literally like my third parent and sometimes the most attentive parent in my life. And then it's interesting. I also started hating Christmas that
Yeah,
year.
you would.
And it wasn't until adulthood that I put it together. I was like, why do I hate Christmas? Oh, I started hating Christmas the year that he died. No wonder. And
Yeah.
I somehow in my brain, it wasn't until adulthood that I was able to connect the two, but now it seems so obvious. Like, yeah, of course.
Of course. Yeah. So, okay,
Yeah.
what happened after that? So you grew up and
So,
continued to be
okay, yeah.
depressed
So
or
teenagehood was really hard. I
Mhm.
was sent to boarding school at 15. I was
Okay.
telling my sister actually just the other day because we were talking about some family stuff, and like I had a predominant fear of like if my parents die, who's going to take care of me?
Mhm.
And that was like a fear I had going away to boarding school, and I was doing things like banging my head against the wall, biting myself. I was in a lot of distress.
Yeah.
And my parental response was maybe not, I mean, of course, there's a wide range of what parents do or how they show up, etc. But it was not really all that attentive to me.
Mhm.
And I realized at some point, so this is later on, probably in my 30s, but I realized that part of what I struggled with was inability to express my outrage, pain, and hurt at my parents for being unavailable to me and not supporting me.
Mhm.
Because, okay, I had this huge loss, right?
Yeah.
So to differentiate from my parents was too all sort of life threatening, right? So actually, it was in my 30s, somebody asked me if I'd ever rebelled in my
Mhm.
family. And that was a wake up moment for me because I realized, no, I've been so attached to my parents. And when I would come to them with things that were upsetting to me or felt wrong about what was happening in our relationship, it was always met with denial. It was
Hmm.
always, what are you talking about? We did this and this for you. Like, so what happened is I internalized my pain and my struggle as something wrong with me because my family members, my parents were not willing to admit that the reality that I grew up in was anything other than perfect and wonderful. So
Right.
it created a lot of cognitive dissonance and a lot of confusion. And
Absolutely, it would.
so
Yeah.
my options sort of on a psychological subconscious level were either to uh, disagree with my parents and validate my experience and my reality and my emotions and then have a right to my feelings, but then lose my connection with them, lose my attachment, which having gone through an early attachment loss, I wasn't prepared to do,
Mhm.
or align and agree with them. Like, okay, I'm going to maintain my relationship with them. But then what do I do with all these feelings I have about what's happening? I just makes me messed up. Like,
Right, then you're just
what's wrong with
gaslighting
me? I'm
yourself.
broken. Gaslighting myself, trying to figure out, like, I mean, yeah, so much of my life was trying to get to the bottom of what was wrong with me, not realizing that actually, in many cases, I was what I call, and I talk about this a lot in the book, is that I was having an emotionally appropriate response to the things that were happening to me
Right. Yeah.
and the neglect and but it got all mixed up, right? And so that gaslighting piece for me, I think, is a huge piece of what created my struggle. It's not that my parents were neglectful and emotionally unavailable for me. It's that they couldn't acknowledge that they were,
Right.
right? And I spent so many years trying to figure out what happened to me. Like my parents weren't awful, horrible people. Like, why do I feel so messed up? And it's really just the lack of acknowledgement that it of my pain.
Mhm.
And so that was really a huge part. And so fast forward, then I got into my 30s. Was asked this question, like, have you ever rebelled from your family? And I did a transformational breath work session, which is it's a healing modality that involves your breath, and it involves connecting with places where you've used your breath to control or suppress emotion. And I got in touch with a whole bunch of anger I didn't know I had.
Mm.
And just it was very liberating for me to be like, you know what? I am pissed. Like, this is not okay. And I don't care what you say, and I don't care what you think. I know what I experience, and I'm going to start validating my own truth and my own reality. And that was definitely a big piece of shifting into a different experience. Like owning that my feelings were valid, that the lack of support I received in my life from my family, even into my 30s, was upsetting, and that I had a right to be upset. And that definitely lifted things for me. Now, there are some other aspects that were also at play, but that was a key piece. And then
Right.
healing some of that childhood trauma as well, but really um, undoing the gaslighting
Yeah.
of myself to
Um,
say, your feelings are valid. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to ask if you are familiar with childhood emotional neglect. Um, and I can't remember the name of the doctor, but she's written 2 books and she has a course, and I'm looking over at my bookshelf, but I can't see the books right now. Um,
Well, one
and
book I read, and maybe this will answer your question, but one book I read that really spoke to me and helped me have a language for my experience that I hadn't had before is called The Emotionally Absent Mother.
okay.
And
So
that one
probably,
really connected with me.
yeah, probably similar. So childhood emotional neglect is, yeah, you have a great childhood. There's nothing missing. Your parents love you, except that they're not there for you emotionally. And
Yeah, they can't connect.
they can't connect.
Yeah,
They don't know there's anything wrong because they're doing everything that they know how to do, but they're just
exactly.
not there
Yeah,
for you emotionally. And it's not, it's sort of very hidden neglect because they love you in every other way, and you're happy as a clam as
right.
a
Or they take
kid.
good care of you. They
They
feed you
love
good
you, they
food.
snuggle
They make sure
you.
you go to,
Exactly.
yeah. Well, I don't
But
know if I got much snuggling, but
well,
yeah,
what
yeah,
however it shows up, but
yeah.
yeah, it's
But
it's a
yeah,
thing, and it's really hard
in
to
my journey,
define.
yeah, in my journey of trying to understand myself and then other people, and like part of my professional world was to get really invested in the well-being of children and understanding children. But that, yeah, this level of I can't put my finger on what's wrong,
Hmm.
right? That's a struggleful place, right? And sometimes the subtle forms of, and not to discount people who have been through really hard things and really obvious forms of abuse, but there is a
Right.
whole lane, so to speak, of neglect and of impact that children experience that is not commonly recognized by society, that leaves a lot of us wondering, like, what's wrong with me? Because I can't put my finger on like these pillars of abuse that are very obvious. And I think gaslighting is one of those things that
Hmm.
is now becoming more commonly recognized, but it's a form of abuse that most people are not familiar with, and they don't recognize that it went on for them.
Hmm.
And so it can lead to a lot of confusion and turmoil, and like sort of this feeling that my experience and my feelings are the problem and I am the one that's wrong, because there's nothing, I can't put my finger on the thing outside of me that is the problem, right?
Right.
And then also, you, if it's you, then you can fix you. If your parents are the problem, you're in trouble, especially when you're young, because
Yeah.
you need your parents to survive. So if your parents are broken and flawed, you're doomed. But if you're broken and flawed, then you have something to work with. And that's a very common, I see that a lot with my clients, very common um, internalization of what they experienced. What I like to say is, you were never not enough, but you learn to believe that you are not enough from people who could not meet your needs and who you evolutionarily required to meet your needs, right?
Hmm.
And so the not enoughness is actually the failure of others to show up for you in the way that was, you were designed as a human being,
Right.
but you had to internalize it as being something wrong with you in order to survive.
Right. which then sometimes in turns leads us to not wanting to survive.
Yeah, not wanting to, yeah, exactly, right? Or I think sort of underneath that, right, is I'm gonna try to do everything in my power to make me be enough or to get my needs met or get my caregivers to respond to me. And when they don't, then I think I'm better off not being here. I think I should just, I don't matter, whatever all those feelings are. Just get me out of here. I'm done. Everything, because we failed to affect the situation,
Hmm.
right? And then many of us continue to internalize it and think that it was us to begin with. It was us that was the problem to begin with, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I think also on that vein is there's a lot of, as you get older, a lot of those feelings, the intense feelings, go back to being a little child who was abandoned, who didn't get the support that they needed, that didn't get what they wanted. So there's a repetition that this is what I see. I work a lot with the subconscious. So I see a lot of like what comes up is actually your inner child subconscious coming up and feeling desperate and feeling hopeless, all of those kinds of things. And so there's a healing that needs to happen to that earlier part of yourself so that it can feel safe, so it can feel supported, so that it can grow up basically and get the nurturing and care that it requires.
Hmm. Yeah. My therapist once told me that when you go through a trauma, um, oftentimes you stay emotionally stuck at that age when it happened. So
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's really important to go back and nurture that child at that age
And
where
to
things,
me, it goes back
went
a
wacky.
bit to this concept of having an emotionally appropriate response to what happened to you.
Hmm.
Right? And I can't tell you how many people, like, it will be my first conversation with someone, and within minutes of being on the call, we're back to when they were 3 to 5 years old. And
Yeah.
there's something that is hurting inside of them that they never got seen for, they never got supported for, they never got to have an emotionally appropriate response to. And they've been carrying it around their entire lives. And I'm talking about people who are in their 50s and 60s and older who
Hmm.
still have this 5-year-old, 3-year-old hurt. And it's amazing to witness what happens when finally we look at it and we give that little inner child the support it was lacking at that moment, and
Yeah.
how much can shift finally in a person's life. I mean, I think of a couple examples. I have one client who lost her mom when she was 2 years old
Oh.
and didn't get a lot of support and she's well older than me. So, probably in her 60s or 70s. And a lot of healing that we did around that loss, right? And then a client, her mom, I think maybe she was 4 and her mom lost a child, a baby,
Hmm.
and was never the same. And how that affected her and internalized her, it was internalized for her and affected all of her life, and what amazing shifts started to take place when we went back and visited with that part of that self that was basically left behind and needed to be brought up to speed and reconnected.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I think there's a lot of like in my exploration of struggling with suicide and working with people who have struggled with their mental health, there's a big component that is early childhood trauma. Absolutely. Then I think there's a couple other things which I'd love to touch on. One of which is if you're a highly insensitive or empathic person,
Hmm.
right? So that was another, like, this childhood trauma piece was definitely a big piece for me, but it wasn't the only piece. Another piece of it was that I'm highly sensitive and I easily absorb the feelings of other people. And
Hmm.
so I had done so much personal development work on myself, so much healing work, looking at my issues repeated. And also what we said, I internalized that I was the problem. And if I could just fix me, everything would be okay.
Right.
but I also was easily taking on feelings and energies of other people and then thinking they were mine and trying to sort them out. And what I like to say is, like, you can't fix, solve, or heal or resolve something that wasn't yours in the first place. So if you're around a sad person and you start feeling sad, but you think that it's your own sadness, and
Right.
then you're trying to be like, why am I sad? There's no real good answer.
Yeah.
And so for me, that was a huge pivotal point as well. And some of what my book is about understanding what it means to be empathic and how that affects your mental health, and how much of what you experience as the heaviness and um, weight of your life might actually be absorbing and feeling all the energies of everybody else.
Right.
And there
Just
is,
absorbing the
at least in
heaviness
my
and the weight
experience,
of
there,
the whole world.
yeah, the whole world. And there is, for me, at least in everything that I've done, there is a connection between childhood trauma and absorbing everybody else's stuff. And the more that I worked on understanding what it meant to be empathic and what was my own responses to things and what was me just perceiving stuff, the easier it got to figure out some of my childhood stuff. And then vice versa. The more that I worked through and looked at and healed those childhood things, then the easier it became to work out the empath things as well. But that's like another huge piece that I don't think gets talked about enough as a factor toward a depression and
Mhm.
even suicidal ideation. You can pick up on other people's really heavy thoughts
Yeah.
and think that they're yours.
Hmm. Yeah. It's so interesting. It, every week and I talk to people and, there's just so much of this, and that's why I'm doing this, but everybody's
Yeah.
experiences are so similar. And however we choose
Mm.
to talk about them, whether we're talking about being empathic or inner child trauma or whatever, it's all the same. We're all the same, and we all go through this on
Right?
some level or another. And, it's just like, why don't we talk about this enough? It's like you
To
shouldn't
me,
be a
the
secret and the work you do shouldn't be a secret. Your book shouldn't be a secret. Like everybody
yeah,
should know about these
yeah,
things. And we should all know that we all go through these struggles.
right. Because the irony is, it's like I laugh to, because how many people, if you just knew how many people feel alone and like nobody else as you do,
Hmm.
you would laugh, because it's like we think, oh, I'm no the only one in the world that feels this way. But then how many people in the world feel that way? It's
I know.
amazing.
Get a whole
So
giant room full of
absolutely.
people
And
and think like, okay, everybody, close your eyes. And if you think I'm the problem, it's me, put up your hand. And everybody would put up their hand. Like we all think it's us and it's up to us to fix. And there's nothing wrong with, personal development and trying to be the best version of yourself. But by all means, don't blame yourself for
yeah,
everything that you're going through.
exactly. One of the things that I talk about in the book a little bit is that, what if there's actually nothing wrong with you? What if you actually work incredibly well, and there's a reason, there's a um there's a function behind everything that happens for you. You just haven't learned how to interpret it or understand it yet. So even my suicidal level depression, there was wisdom behind that. There was information behind that. When I learned how to unpack it, help me understand myself better, help me understand my life better. I say everything is information that you can use to your advantage, right? So it's really hard information, it's really desperate information, but there's something there, and it's some way your system is trying to cope.
Yeah.
And if we can switch out of this frame that what's wrong with me? What's my problem? Why am I like, actually, what is your being trying to communicate with you? And what is it trying to tell you? And even like these self-destructive habits, whatever, I'll tell you, like your subconscious put that in place for a reason to try to help protect you and help you survive. And sometimes it made sense at one point in your life, like when you were a little kid and you couldn't get out of an environment, and now you keep doing it in your adult life and it frustrates you and you're irritated by it, whatever. But actually, if you could pull back the curtain to understand what your subconscious was trying to do, you'd be like, thank you so much. You kept me safe. You helped me survive.
Right.
Now we just need to like realize you don't need that strategy anymore. Let's update. Let's, reassess. That danger
Mhm.
is not real anymore.
Right.
But yeah, I really want people to get to the place and like just have those conversations that says, look, you're not wrong, screwed up, and broken. I remember having this thought, which is like, nature is intelligently designed, right? There's a purpose and a function to like pretty much everything in nature,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
It's not just, and so I'm like, well, humans are also part of nature.
Yeah.
And so there's got to be some intelligence to this emotional experience.
Yeah.
And one of the things that really shifted for me about, like, I used to argue with my feelings so much, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners have this experience. What's wrong with me? Why am I feeling this way? I shouldn't be feeling this way. My feelings are wrong. And
Right.
the shift of like, actually, our emotions are not wrong. We were designed with emotions for some reason,
Yeah.
right? So to try to get rid of all my negative feelings, get rid of all my emotions, like actually no, they must, if like we all experience them, there must be some purpose to them, right? And
Yeah.
so then trying to understand what is the purpose of these feelings. And in my study of nonviolent communication, what I was introduced to was um, basically your feelings are indicators of your needs. And that was like a real eye opener for me. So it's almost like, I think of this is going to date myself, but You've Got Mail, they had these little red flags that popped up when you had a mail in your inbox. And so I think of feelings as that little red flag of like, there's something here for you to pay attention to. And
That's
what
awesome. I
what is
love
this
that.
feeling trying to indicate? What is this feel like? The feeling's like, hey, pay attention. What do you need to pay attention to? And then when you can tease apart, okay, my feeling is telling me, there's a need that I have that's not getting met. There's something behind it. And that it's actually here to help me and give me information.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, so much, like so many feelings warn you about danger. There's just so many things that feelings are supposed to do that most of us, going back to childhood, got trained out of, right? We
Yeah.
had a feeling about something. This doesn't feel good to me. This doesn't feel okay to me. Our caregivers told us, like, you have nothing to cry about. What's your problem?
Mhm.
Right? So those indicators that we were getting, the signals that we were getting were basically cut off, right? So we stopped being able to receive the information that was coming to us to tell us about our environment, help us mediate through our environment. People wonder why they get in the same abusive relationship over and over again, or similar dynamics with people. I think it's in part because all of those signals were shut down for you
Yeah.
at an early age. And then, unless you are able to go back and process and have emotionally appropriate responses to what happened to you and reclaimed your sort of emotional navigation system,
Mhm.
then the signals are not going off that tell you that something's wrong. And then you just end up in this place where you're like, how did I get here? Well, you got there because all the signals were shut down to tell you that's not a good place to go, so
Right.
to speak.
Yeah, and it's comfortable because you recognize it because you've been through it before.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's comfortable and it's familiar, but I just really think like our emotions, our feelings serve a valuable purpose. And yeah, sometimes they are, like in adult life, you're having outsized reactions and outsized emotions to things that seem small, or but if you can put it in context
Yeah.
and you put it in all of the battle. I'm just thinking of anger, for example, because that's like a classic one, but like maybe you're having anger and rage problem, and whatever stimulus in your present reality doesn't warrant the amount of fury that you respond with. And yet, if you can trace it back, there's a place in which that makes sense, right?
Mhm.
And so if you can mediate and heal that place in you that never got to move through that emotion in a healthy and appropriate way, then you can start to integrate it and then show up more and more to your present day life with
Yes.
appropriate level of response to what's happening in the moment.
Yes. 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 I love this
Woohoo!
conversation that we're having. So thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for
Thank you for being
creating this
here. And
space.
yeah. What was the name of your book again? We'll put it in the
Yeah, it's
description
called
as well.
Finding Your Own Happy.
Finding your own
So
happy.
Finding Your
All
Own
right.
Happy. Yeah.
I will
Because I
look
mean,
it up.
also that title, right, is like how many, this is also a piece I think that lends to feeling hopeless and suicidal, is you tried everybody else's prescriptions for happiness. You tried
Mhm.
all the things that everybody else seems to say, you know, do mindfulness, meditate, do yoga, go to therapy, whatever those things are, and it's still not working for you.
Uh-huh.
And then it contributes to the like, well, now I must truly be the
I'm beyond
exception.
help. Yeah.
I'm beyond help. I must be just different and dysfunctional like nobody else in this world, because the things that work for everybody else don't work for me. So it's hopeless. And I mean, I was kind of at that point. I was at a point, it was my early 30s. I was homeless, I was broke, and I was struggling with a lot of being empathic and like to this point of like, okay, something has to change. Either I am really going to get out of here and
Mm-hmm.
take my own life, or I'm going to figure out how to be here in a way that isn't so incredibly painful for me so much of the time.
Yeah.
And I had decided prior that, like, first of all, I wasn't sure what was on the other side of ending my own life and if it would truly stop the suffering. That was a
Mm-hmm.
piece of it for me. Because I mean, I've read some interesting near-death experience accounts that didn't convince me that it was all going to be over, right?
Right.
And because really what we want when we want to die, in my experience, and I think it's true for a lot of people, is we want our suffering to end. We
Right.
don't want to be in pain anymore. We don't want to
Exactly.
hurt anymore. And so that was a choice point for me where I said, either I'm out or I'm going to figure out how to be here in a way that doesn't cause me such severe pain and suffering. And that led me on sort of the journey that ended up being my book, which is let me get to the bottom of this, no matter what it takes. Even if nobody else in my life has the answers, I'm going to get to the bottom and I'm going to figure out the answers that work for me and help me get to a place of feeling happy. Right. And so that was my own unique journey to say, okay, I'm highly empathic. That's a piece of it. I have this unresolved childhood trauma. That's a piece of it. Also, another thing that I'm going to just bring up because I think it's important to talk about, it's like maybe taboo for some people, but another piece of it is being aware of the spirit world and
Mhm.
what some people call entities. And I had some really profound experiences where it became very clear to me that there were, so entities to me are just energies without physical form.
Mhm.
They're not
Yep.
really that, like, some people get scared by that word, but there were some really dark energies that I would experience throughout my life. And when I learned that they were potentially what people call entities, and that that's what was affecting me. And then I used tools to counteract it. That really dark space that I went into disappeared and went away.
Hmm.
And I was able to get out of it. And I am quite convinced at this point in my life that people are way more psychic and aware and sensitive to all sorts of energies around them than they give themselves credit for.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
sometimes some of these really dark thoughts and these really dark energies are not you. There's some energy from the spirit world that has grabbed onto you and is compelling you. And that sounds really scary, but there's ways to counteract it. But I really do think that sometimes people get overtaken by these other energies. I mean, and even myself, I mean, like, what happened? I mean, how many people say, I just didn't feel like myself? I didn't feel quite
Mhm.
right. It's like, yeah, there was a force, an energetic force that was coming in and impacting you that wasn't entirely you.
Mhm.
Um, so, and what I say is like, you don't have to believe that there are really dead people floating around or whatever that is, but entertain the possibility that there could be some energies out there that are affecting you, or work with that premise it and use the tools to counteract it and see what happens for you. Right? I don't 100% know that it's true. I just know that if I work from the premise that that's what's affecting me in these certain circumstances, and then use the tools I was given to counteract it, I feel a dynamic shift and I can get out of really dark depression.
Yeah.
Now, maybe it's just some psychological trick that works for me, but I'm always looking at what's going to work, what's going to make the difference, and what's going to shift things. And if it's not working, let's try something else. But
Exactly.
like, let's help you get back to a better feeling place, a happier feeling place, not like I'm curled up in a ball and want to die kind of place. Like,
Yeah.
let's help you have some lightness.
Well, and
And I've
that's
worked now with many different clients that this has been effective for. Like, whether it's you're picking up on your neighbor or your mom, or you have a childhood trauma, or there's some spirits, whatever, let's just help you get back to feeling like your authentic true self and
Mhm.
having greater ease.
Yeah. And that's a lot of it is just staying open-minded. And if the things that you've tried haven't worked, then try something else, no matter how out there it might seem or feel,
Yes.
just keep trying. I had a client one time who
Yeah.
had, he didn't have mental health struggles, but he had a recurrent pain issue. And he was just making the
Mm-hmm.
rounds to everybody. Like, he's like, "I've been to, like, all of the Western medicine people, and that hasn't helped, and now I'm trying all the alternative medicine people," and I was practicing Reiki at the time, and he was like, "You're next." So, he'd been to
Yeah.
acupuncture and acupressure and Bowen therapy, and, like, you name it, he had tried it. And he came, and
Yeah.
Reiki ended up being what helped him the most. And it was amazing, but
Yeah.
he was like, "I don't even know what you're doing, but I am just, like, ticking things off the list that people have said is good for pain relief." Like, you don't have
Yeah.
to understand how it
Yeah.
works. You don't have
You
to
don't have to, and
really,
I
like,
think,
dive deep
yeah,
into it. Just try it.
exactly. And I think part of my one of the reason I wrote the book was I want to expand the field of conversation, right? To include these kinds of, and it might not be the answer for everybody, it might not be the
Yeah.
solution for everybody, but to know that this is a direction in which you can explore and you can look, and you might find an answer that hasn't been yet available to you. And also to shorten, because for me it was kind of what you're saying. I tried this, I tried that, I tried da 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 da, around the block. The only thing I didn't do was go on medication. But um I wanted to shorten that process for people to say, look, like, I tried all the things, and here's some of the things that really worked, or here's the insights that I had that made the biggest difference. And
Yeah.
hopefully, if you read this book, if you get this information, then you know which directions to try that are going to be the most effective and most useful and helpful for you.
Yeah.
And that aren't readily available in most. I mean, all the practitioners I went to, I mean, there were quite a few, and a lot of alternative stuff because that's the culture and the background that I come from. But I can't think of like maybe one person at one point had some inkling that I might be absorbing or feeling some other people's feelings. But for the most part, the assumption across the board was it originated with me.
Mm-hmm.
And to even just starting from that premise made it really ineffective.
Right.
Like if we'd started from the premise of what is your stuff and what is you stuff that you're feeling, sensing, aware of, that would have made a monumental difference right there. Be like, oh, all of that is not you.
Mm-hmm.
This little sliver right here is something we can work on that is about you. And now let's help you learn. So one of the things I teach in the book and in my work is how do you learn to differentiate between what is your emotion, your feeling, and your energy, and separate yourself out of it and be connected to your own self and your own energy and really ground in like, okay, this is what me being me feels like when
Mm-hmm.
I'm not clouded over by everybody else. And a lot
Right.
of people have never, like, they don't have a baseline for that. And
Yeah.
so that's, to me, that's a super valuable place to get to is like, what's your baseline of experience? Oh, this is what me being me actually feels like. So now I know when something else comes in, I'm just aware of something. That's not actually me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So interesting. Thank you so much for being here today and sharing your story and your wisdom and yeah, just being in the world and helping other people feel better.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I know what it's like to be in that struggle, and I also know like what it's like to get out to the other side and to a place at some point didn't even know was possible.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I was just so in the struggle for so long. I didn't even know it was possible to lift all that heaviness and to feel that different way. And so if I can do it and I can get there, I have faith that others can as well. And you might need some help and assistance on that journey, but it's not impossible. There is you know, a space outside of that, beyond that, whole wide world of possibility beyond that.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for listening. Remember that you are loved, you are worthy, you are valuable, you are meant for more, and that it really does get better. If you are in crisis, there are numbers that you can call or text to get the help that you need. That information for Canada and the US is in the description below each episode. If you are in immediate crisis, please call 911. We love you, and I hope you'll listen again.